The streets of Cairo in the early 2010s resembled a cauldron about to boil over. Smoke hung in the air, mixed with the sound of hurried footsteps, shouts of protest, and sirens in the distance. I was only 20 years old, and my name was Muhammad. He carried that name proudly, until pain and anger turned it into a shield, a name that hit a heart in pieces. The city was in turmoil. The Mubarak regime had fallen, but everything around me seemed even more out of control. Amidst the noise and chaos, the call to prayer still echoed from the minarets, like a distant reminder of something sacred. But inside me, there was no peace. There was anger, a hole that had been gaping since the loss of my brother, Isef. Isef was my other half. We had grown up together on the streets of Mbaba, sharing bread, dreams, and laughter. But he was ripped from me in a fight with Coptic Christians. It was there, in front of a church, that he fell, lifeless. The news called it a misunderstanding, but for me, it was a wound that never healed. It was as if the ground had disappeared from under my feet. Grief turned to anger, and anger, a thirst for revenge. That's how I ended up joining a radical Islamic group. They claimed to fight for justice. They said God was with us. And I wanted to believe it. The black flags, the fiery words, the hate-filled eyes. It gave me a sense of belonging. For the first time since my brother's death, I felt like I belonged. We met in secret, in abandoned warehouses and dark alleys. The air smelled of cigarettes, sweat, and anger. Our leader, Hassan, was a marked man, scarred on his face, hateful in his soul. He spoke fervently of an Islam betrayed, distorted by the infidel. They have desecrated our land, he said. We will burn their churches, take their... And I nodded. My dead brother's face was all I saw. Each meeting took us deeper into the darkness. We planned attacks with rocks, fire, and destruction. I carried the Molotov cocktails with steady hands, as if I were carrying justice. As the flames rose and people ran in despair, I told myself it was right. But deep inside, there was an unease, a whisper I did everything I could to ignore. We trained in the desert, under the scorching sun, learning to use weapons as tools of redemption. I gave myself completely to that life. But every time I returned home, I saw my mother sitting by the window, twirling the beads of the rosary she never stopped holding, whispering Isef's name as if she still hoped to see him walk through the door. I couldn't meet her gaze. My father, a quiet, soft-spoken, once tried to reach me. That's not the way, Muhammad. He spoke with love, but I wouldn't listen. I was harsh, cold, because deep down, I was afraid he was right. And fear, back then, was something I couldn't allow to surface. The group was my new family. They gave me direction, purpose. I clung to it tooth and nail. Then, one sultry night, Hassan revealed a new plan: to attack a Christian village, burn churches, destroy lives. I volunteered without thinking. The pain of losing my brother still screamed inside me, and I wanted to make others feel what I felt. We loaded the vans with gasoline and weapons. We set off under the dark sky, leaving behind the glow of the city lights. It was as if we were crossing an invisible line, a path of no return. The village was plunged into a dense silence, as if it knew what was coming. The simple houses, made of mud and irregular bricks, surrounded a small church with a wooden cross perched on top. That cross seemed to stare at me, challenging everything I believed in that moment. My heart pounded. The plan was clear: attack, burn, win. But deep down, something stirred. The image of my mother weeping, murmuring prayers for a son she no longer recognized, tried to emerge, and I pushed it back, clutching the can of gasoline tightly in my hand. The attack began like all the others. Screams, fire, destruction. Molotov cocktails flew through the air, shattering glass, sending flames spreading across the church walls. The heat grew as smoke and panic mixed in the air. I ran along with the others, my body moving with the adrenaline rush. My heart seemed elsewhere. We entered houses, pushing doors, shouting orders, dragging families. In one of them, I stopped near the window. The heat from the flames beat down on my face. And that's where I saw them. A father hugging his wife and two young children, all kneeling in the corner of the room. Their eyes were closed. They were praying. Even with the destruction all around them, their voices were calm, almost serene. The father whispered words of trust and peace, as if he believed someone was still listening. Something inside me broke. I stood still. The sounds around me faded for... My mind couldn't process it. How could these people, under threat of death, have such peace? For a moment, I felt a shame I'd never felt before. I walked away, silent, my heart heavy. The attack was over. For the group, it was a success. For me, it was the beginning of the end. That night, back in our hideout in Cairo, I couldn't sleep. The image of that family haunted me. Their voices still echoed in my thoughts, like a soft song in a place where there had been only noise. The victory tasted like ashes. I sat on my bed, head in my hands, staring at the dim ceiling light. The laughter of the others outside sounded distant. I was there, but I no longer belonged there. It was that morning that it happened. I dreamed, Or perhaps it was more than a dream. A man in white appeared before me. His presence was intense, but there was a kindness in his eyes I had never seen before. He looked at me without anger, without haste, and asked me only one question: "Why do you chase me?" His voice was like a gentle thunder, which didn't hurt, but shook everything inside. I woke up with my heart racing and my face covered in sweat. That question stayed with me. I didn't know who he was, but I felt like he knew me better than I knew myself. In that moment, something cracked inside me. A part of the armor I'd spent years building began to crumble. The next day, I tried to follow the group's routine. I cleaned weapons with trembling hands, relayed instructions with a lump in my throat. Hassan watched me suspiciously. "You're distracted, Muhammad," he said. I tried to smile. I nodded, but inside, I was far away. That voice, that piece of the Christian family, that dream, everything pulled me away. I began to wonder if Isef's death was truly being honored by all this. Would he have approved of what I'd become? Or had I simply used the pain of loss as an excuse to lose myself too? At home, my mother's gaze pierced me. It was as if she knew something was changing. I couldn't face it. I fled to my room, like a guilty child. The weight inside me was unbearable. The doubt that had arisen that night wouldn't leave me alone. And I knew, deep down, that this doubt was actually a calling, an invitation, and I feared what would come if I accepted, but I knew I couldn't stay where I was. One afternoon, after a meeting, I stayed behind in the warehouse. The place was nearly empty, except for the muffled echo of Hassan's last footsteps and words. He spoke fervently about the next attack, but this time, the target was children. My stomach churned. Something inside me screamed, and then, like a light in the darkness, the memory of that family's prayer returned. At peace. It was the exact opposite of what had driven us. I felt a tear well. It wasn't anger, nor pain. It was something I couldn't yet name. I wandered aimlessly through the streets. The noise of the city, horns, vendors, the call to prayer, seemed distant, as if I were in another world. My steps led me to a dusty shop, the kind no one pays much attention to. And there, in a forgotten corner, my eyes fell on a book, a Bible. The cover was worn, old, almost forgotten, but my heart raced, as if I had found something forbidden, or sacred. I picked it up with trembling hands and hid it under my shirt. It was the most daring act of my life, a silent gesture of rebellion against everything I had become. That night, I hid under the blanket and opened the book carefully, as if it were a fragile treasure. The first page was a mystery, but a mystery that drew me in. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. My heart beat fast. I didn't understand everything, but there was something there that spoke to me. The anger that had fueled me for so long began to give way to a different, deeper whisper, a calling. I woke up the next day with the echoes of the dream still fresh in my mind. The same man in white. The same question, "Why do you chase me?" His voice still sounded like thunder, but it wasn't condemnation. It was an invitation. I was 20 years old. I still carried the pain of Isef's death, the anger, the confusion, but now there was something more, a spark, a desire to understand the peace I had witnessed in the eyes of someone I considered in the warehouse. The atmosphere was tense and vibrant. Hassan outlined the next plan with his usual furious tone. Another Coptic village, another church to burn, more innocents to be used as bait. Take everything, burn everything, make them pay. I nodded outwardly. Inside, my world was crumbling. Memories of the family praying as their house burned flooding back. The Bible, hidden under the mattress, seemed to weigh heavily on my conscience. We loaded the vans with every gallon I touched felt cooler against my sweaty hands. My thoughts were elsewhere. As we left, Cairo faded into the distance. Its lights, its chaos, its noises. The road before us seemed endless. The night was thick. Fear and doubt mingled with my sense of obligation. We arrived at the village. The scene was the same. Mud houses clustered together, a small church in the center, its cross illuminated by the dim moonlight. A symbol that had once angered me, now made me uneasy. The attack began as always. Molotov cocktails shattering windows, fire climbing the walls, screams of despair, men fleeing, women weeping. I ran with the others, but my heart seemed to be lagging behind. We invaded homes. Violence was automatic, part of the routine. But then again, I saw them. The same family, the same serenity. Huddled in a corner, surrounded by chaos, their voices rose in prayer, even as the roof was about to collapse on their heads. It paralyzed me. I stood there, motionless, the heat of the fire on my face, their voices piercing my chest like an arrow. How could they maintain faith amidst terror? How could they pray for peace while I represented war? It was there, at that window, that I realized I was not I was chained to anger, and for the first time, I wanted to be free from it. The father's eyes were closed. His arms were tightly wrapped around his wife and 2 children, while his voice broke through the tumult with a quiet plea, "Lord, have mercy." Amidst the fire, screams, and destruction, their faces conveyed a calm that disarmed me. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. My hands froze. The fuel can almost slipped from I turned my face away. My chest tightened. Their image remained etched in my mind as I retreated with the rest of the group. The mission was deemed a success. Laughter echoed in the van on the way back. A celebratory atmosphere pervaded, but I remained silent. Every smile seemed to pierce me. My mind was elsewhere, in that house, in that prayer, in that impossible peace. As the world around me vibrated with hatred and fanaticism, something inside me began to break. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom. The apartment was dark and silent, except for my mother's soft snores. That simple, familiar sound contrasted with the storm raging inside me. I knelt beside the bed and grabbed the Bible hidden under the mattress. I ran my fingers over the pages until my eyes lit on something that took my breath away. A man nailed to a cross, begging forgiveness for those who were killing him. He said, "Father, forgive them." I closed the book with trembling. The tears came hard, unstoppable. The dream's question, "Why do you persecute me?" came back with more intensity. Those eyes, so full of mercy, and yet they seemed to pierce my soul. I wondered, was this man real? Did he see me? Was he there in that house while I spread terror? Sleep didn't come that night. Only the memory of that family, that prayer, that peace that exposed the lie of my life. I paced the room, the floor creaking beneath my footsteps. The call to prayer sounded distant, like something that no longer called to me. The group's cause, to kill, to conquer, to purify, now felt empty, rotten. A lie I'd swallowed out of anger, pain, loss. I remembered Isef, the flame that ignited my hatred. But did this path honor him? Or did it destroy what was left of him? My mother woke up. She looked at me tenderly. Her voice was soft, but sharp. "Muhammad, are you okay?" I answered yes, in a weak whisper. But inside, guilt gnawed at me. Her love was like a mirror, reflecting the man I had been before, and how much I had lost. The next morning, I continued with the group's tasks. My fingers could barely hold the weapon. The Bible was on my mind. Hassan noticed my aloofness. His hard gaze fell on me. "You are weak, Muhammad," he said, the scar on his cheek twitching. I forced a smile and shook my head, but my heart was in pieces. Something inside me was cracking completely. At home, I hid the Bible somewhere. I knew if it were discovered, I would be marked, but I couldn't put it away any longer. My mother's eyes followed me. Her silence was sharper than any accusation. One afternoon, after another meeting, I stayed behind. The warehouse was empty, quiet, and there, hidden, I heard Hassan talking with other leaders. The next target would be children. His tone was cold, calculated, and my stomach churned. That peace, that prayer, it all came rushing back to me. How could I keep pretending this was right? I returned home in silence. That night, I sat on the thin mattress in my room, the dim light casting shadows on the cracked walls. I opened the Bible once more, like someone searching for a last breath of truth. I read about Jesus, about love for enemies, about forgiveness for those who persecute. It hit me like an avalanche. Those words didn't just speak to my mind, they spoke to my heart. I cried. I cried like I'd never cried before. I curled up, hiding my face in the stifling my sobs. For the first time, I wasn't crying out of anger or revenge. I was crying out of regret, for the pain I'd caused, for the truth that was beginning to set me free. The dream's question wouldn't leave me alone. "Why do you haunt me?" was more than a memory. It was a call, something that refused to be ignored. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand that man in white, that peace that defied everything I knew. Fear of the group, of Hassan's reaction, kept me immobile. Even so, something inside me stirred as never before. I thought of the village, the flames, the calm gaze of that family. There was a hope there, a pull towards something new I couldn't yet name. The streets of Cairo were bustling as always. Vendors shouted, cars honked incessantly. But inside me, everything had gone silent. It was a kind of emptiness. Or perhaps a new space formed, a space where doubt and grace began to face each other, setting the stage for a choice I wasn't yet ready to make. I sat on the bed in the small apartment, in the darkness. The Bible lay open in the dim light of an old-fashioned lamp. Each page I read was like a silent rebellion against everything that had consumed me for so long. The dream of Jesus still echoed. "Why do you persecute?" That soft voice was persistent, contrasting with the group's war cry that still echoed in my ears. I was 21 now. Hatred still burned in some parts of me, but now it was surrounded by doubt, by a hunger for truth. The memory of the family praying during the attack, that unshakable calm, continued to haunt me. The Muslim call to prayer rang out as always, but it no longer reached me in the same way. It was as if I were listening to another frequency, something deeper, quieter, truer. I read about a man crucified for loving too much. A man who, despite being betrayed, humiliated, and beaten, prayed for his enemies as he died. It baffled me. How could anyone love like? I began writing in a notebook I kept hidden. What if I'm wrong? What if everything I've experienced so far has been based on a lie? Tears fell, blurring the guilt consumed me. But alongside it, a seed of hope sprouted. Every time I reached for the Bible hidden under the mattress, my hands trembled. I knew the risk. If they discovered me, it would be the end. But I kept reading night after night, like someone gasping for air. My mother's soft snores filled the silence, a reminder of a simpler time before everything fell apart. The story of the crucifixion gripped me like no other. That man's pain, the injustice, and yet his forgiveness. I wept, not as someone who merely repents, but as someone who begins to understand. I remembered the girl kidnapped on one of the missions. I remembered her face, her eyes filled with fear. I remembered the whispered prayer as we dragged her away. That day, I ignored her. Now her memory burned within me. It was as if all the faces returned, as if every act I called justice turned against me. The group began to notice. Hassan watched me with narrowed eyes. His scar seemed deeper. The atmosphere in the warehouse was charged. Cigarette smoke, tension, distrust. One night he took me aside. "You're slipping, Muhammad." His voice was low, menacing, and his hand rested casually on a knife. I forced a nod. On the outside, I kept up the appearance. Inside, everything was in ruin. At home, my mother looked at me differently. Her silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. One night, she broke that silence. "You've changed," she said, her hands clutching her old Muslim rosary. I couldn't look at her. I wanted to tell her everything. Tell her about the dreams, the Bible, the doubt, the love I was beginning to glimpse. But fear silenced me. Not of her, but of what this would mean for us. For everything we'd ever been. It was one afternoon, when I least expected it, that a spark of hope was rekindled. Amid the chaos of a busy Cairo street, I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Amir, a childhood friend. We played together when we were boys, before life took us on different paths. When he recognized me, he smiled. A calm, unhurried smile. We talked for a few minutes, and then he told me he was Christian now. A Copt. It hit me like a thunderclap. I stood there, trying to hide my astonishment, but he just said, his eyes full of peace, "Muhammad, if you ever want to talk for real, I'm here." And in that moment, I knew. The road of anger was coming to an end, and a new journey, one I never imagined I'd take, was beginning to unfold before me. The honking of cars and the shouts of vendors formed the usual Cairo symphony, noisy, lively, relentless. Amidst the crowd, I spotted Amir. Time had changed him, but there was something in his gaze that made me pause. He smiled slightly, a hesitant gesture, and greeted me with the calm voice of one who walks carefully. "I heard about the attacks," he said, his eyes searching mine. I tensed. I waited for judgment, but instead, he said, "I have been praying for you." Those words disarmed me. A man who knew who I was, what I had done, and yet, prayed for me. It hit me like an invisible blow. I felt a single tear fall, and I didn't even try to hide it. We talked right there, standing, amidst the chaos of the city and the silence of my heart. Amir told me about a God who forgives, a God who loves even the most lost. And I, almost speechless, asked, Can I see your church?" He nodded with a smile, but assured me he would keep it a secret. And in that moment, a fragile hope began to dawn. In the weeks that followed, we met in dark alleys or in his small apartment, hidden from view. The air there was thick with incense, old books, and peace. Amir lent me a Coptic Bible, marked with handwritten prayers. I read late into the night. The words pierced me like arrows, especially the story of the prodigal son. A son who squandered everything, yet was still welcomed home with a feast. It shattered me. I couldn't help it. I remembered the kidnapped girl, the prayer she whispered as we dragged her away. At the time, I laughed in disdain. Now, it was like a knife spinning inside my chest. I cried, my face buried in the pillow, trying to silence my own sobs. Guilt, a river that overflowed uncontrollably. Amir noticed my pain. One day he placed his hand on my shoulder and said firmly, "There is a way out." I clung to those words like someone drowning and seeing, for the first time, an outstretched branch. I wanted to change. I needed to change, but the group felt it too. The pressure was building. Hassan took me aside. His eyes were blazing, and his breath was hot, like a stalking. "You're getting soft," he spat. The knife in his hand gleamed in the warehouse's dirty light. I forced a compromise, repeated memorized phrases about revenge against the police, but inside I no longer. They planned more violence, even against children, and that revolted me. I pretended to accept a patrol alone that night. Instead, I went home. I slept. My steps were heavy, marked by a kind of betrayal that, for the first time, I felt like liberation. At home, my mother watched me with worried eyes. She said nothing. She just prayed for Isef, whispering his name with the rosary hands. I couldn't look at her. Her silent faith broke me. I loved her, but what I had become was something she could never have imagined. I hid the Bible better. My every move was a dance with danger. If they discovered me, it would be the end. But I kept reading. I kept praying, even though I didn't know how to pray properly. One night, I sat with Amir in the same quiet apartment as always. Candlelight cast soft shadows on the wall. The noise of the city was only a distant whisper. He opened his Bible to John 16:33. In me you have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But take heart. I have overcome the world. And I broke down. I felt my defenses crumble. I confessed everything. The burned churches, the kidnapping, the words we shouted, the tears we ignored. My voice cracked with each sentence. The shame was too heavy. Amir's eyes were filled with compassion. He prayed for me right then and there. His words were simple yet powerful. God forgives, he said. And in that instant, something changed. I felt as if a gentle breeze had come through the window and passed through my soul, as if God's love had found a crack in it. It was at that moment that I decided I would leave the group. I would confess. I didn't know what would happen next, but I needed this peace. I still felt fear. I still carried guilt. But now, for the first time, there was hope. A hope that came not from anger, but from grace. Days later, I saw Amir again. His face showed apprehension, but he led me to a hidden chapel. The place was simple, filled with icons and the scent of myrrh. The priest wore white, so different from the black I usually wore. I knelt there before God and confessed everything. The invasions, the kidnappings, the prayer of the girl who never left me alone. My words came in slurs, heavy, but each one freed me a little more. The tears flowed without me trying to hold them back. It wasn't just remorse, it was regret. And at that altar, I knew I was coming home. Father Mark's face was filled with kindness and calm. I expected some kind of silent judgment, that soul-crushing look, but there was none of it. God sees your heart, he said, his voice sounding like it was taken straight from the Bible. In that moment, I couldn't hold back the tears. A relief mixed with the weight of everything. The forgiveness he offered felt like a gift I never imagined I deserved. He spoke about baptism, a step that still seemed distant, almost frightening. But within me, something new was beginning to blossom. A restless faith, a hope that refused to be extinguished. I left with a restless soul, as if a seed had been planted, ready to. I arrived home that night with my mother's eyes fixed on me, full of worry and fear. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't lie. "I'm leaving the group," I whispered, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. She looked at me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "They're going to kill you." Her tears fell on me, and I hugged her tightly. Her fear and love mingled like a mirror of what I felt inside. I packed a suitcase with what little I had, my Bibles and the notebook with my thoughts and doubts hidden inside. My fingers trembled, but my will was firm. The apartment felt smaller, suffocating, trapped between the weight of the past and the uncertain lightness of redemption. That night, standing in the shadows of my room, my suitcase beside me, my mother's embrace still warm on my skin, her words, "They're going to kill you," thumped in my mind. The chaotic noise of the city outside seemed distant, as if I were in a world apart. I was 28 years old. My heart was torn between fear and hope. The decision to break with the group and confess my sins felt like carrying a huge weight. The violence, the burned churches, the screams of the dragged girl, it all haunted me relentlessly. But Amir's promise, from that hidden chapel, guided me through the dark streets, pulling me forward. I arrived at the chapel, small, ancient, with stone walls dotted with Coptic crosses, the smell of incense mingling with that of old wood. Amir held my shoulder firmly, his eyes shining in the candle. Father Mark was waiting for me there, his kind face and a smile that seemed to say, "You can be saved." I fell to my knees and began to tell everything, my voice cracking with guilt. The attacks, the fire consuming the church, the crying girl I dragged away. "I killed, I destroyed," I sobbed, tears streaming down my face and my hands trembling as I clutched the Bible. The priest's silence was heavy, a silence I dreaded, expecting condemnation. But to my surprise, his eyes softened, filled with the compassion I'd read in Scripture. In a low, warm voice, he spoke, "God sees your heart, Muhammad." Those words echoed in the small chapel as I wept, releasing everything I'd been carrying for so long. He told me about Jesus' infinite love, about his sacrifice, which was made even for me, a sinner who once couldn't forgive himself. And in that moment, I felt a peace I hadn't even known existed. I felt a deep tear well up inside me, an urgent desire for purification. When the priest spoke of baptism as a lifeline, I nodded, even as my heart raced between fear and hope. The cold water from the chapel basin touched my skin, and along with his prayer, "You are forgiven," came a relief that washed away all the shame As I emerged, tears streaming down my face, the crushing weight of my sins seemed to lift, giving way to something new and delicate within me, a faith I had never known before. But the response at home was harsh. My mother looked at me palely when I said, "I converted." The rosary she was holding fell to the floor, and she cried out, her voice full of pain, "You have shamed us." Soon after, my father stormed in, his eyes burning with rage. "Get out," he ordered, pointing to the door. That moment was like a blade piercing my chest. I packed again, squeezing what I could carry, feeling the loss in every gesture. Outside, Amir was waiting for me. He held me tightly as I sobbed, relief and pain mingling. We fled to safety, a small room with barred windows. The sound of the city was a distant roar, almost irrelevant compared to the storm. Sitting on the floor with my Bible open, I found comfort in the words. But the guilt for the pain I'd caused my family lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave me. Time passed slowly, and I tried to adjust to this new life, knowing that the shelter was both a refuge and a prison. The walls seemed to close in around me as I hid from the danger of the group I'd left behind. In my notebook I wrote, "Have I lost them forever?" Words filled with fear and hope, blurred by the falling tear. Amir came to visit me, his voice steady and full of faith. "God will heal all this," he said, reading from Psalm 34:18. "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted." I clung to that promise, even as my spirit trembled. One night, my heart leaped when I heard a knock on the door. A note slipped under it. "The apostate will be found." Fear tightened my chest, and I had to control my breathing, trying to stay calm. The threat was a cruel reminder of my past. I continued praying, learning new words that still seemed strange to me, seeking that peace that seemed so distant. My faith brought me back to Father Mark's chapel. There, I found a haven of light. He taught me new prayers, guiding my wounded soul. I told him details of the invasions, names and faces that still haunted me. Each confession was another drop in the torrent of guilt I couldn't avoid. But the priest didn't condemn. He listened, welcomed, and offered forgiveness, a gift I didn't feel I deserved. I felt a flame of grace grow within me, piercing the darkness of shame. Still, the group's shadow threatened to grow. One afternoon, I noticed a man loitering around our hideout. His face was familiar, a memory of the warehouse where it all began. Panic gripped me, and trembling, I warned Amir. We had to get out of there. We moved to a new place, a new refuge in a different neighborhood. The relief of escape was mixed with the pain of constant vulnerability. At the new shelter, I began to share my story. Amir brought Samir, a man who, like me, had once been radical and was now trying to start over. With a trembling voice, I told him about the attacks, the dreams that awakened me, the forgiveness I had finally found. Samir's eyes filled with tears, his guilt mirroring. We cried together, sharing the pain that, though heavy, united us in a bridge of hope and healing. I began sending encrypted messages, tiny threads of hope cast into the darkness. My hands trembled a little, but I steadied my gaze and wrote, seeking to reach others who might also feel the weight of the life I was leaving behind. The first reply arrived, "Thank you, I'm leaving too." At that moment, the tears fell silently, as if hope had finally found an echo, but the peace was fragile. The threat returned, colder and sharper. A call with Hassan's harsh voice, filled with rage and dark promises of death. I hid the phone, my heart racing, feeling the chains of the past still grip me, despite all my efforts to break free. One such night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights fade into blurry smudges. My diary lay open on my lap, each page a testament to the internal struggle I was waging. The shadow of that violence I once embraced, now a test of my faith. Father Mark had given me something to hold on to. "God's grace is sufficient," he said, quoting 2 Corinthians 12:9. I clung to that promise, like a plank in a storm. Tears streamed down my face as my spirit slowly gained strength. The path that had brought me from the flames of anger to that moment was, after all, a living testament to forgiveness, a voice I was beginning to recognize and claim for myself. The shelter where I lived became a protective silence, a shield against the past, and there, within its simple walls, I prayed for my family, my heart aching with love and longing. My new hideout on the outskirts of Cairo, my safe haven. The barred window let me see the world outside, a distant blur of lights and sounds that barely reached me. With the diary in my lap, I relived every word of forgiveness Father Mark had given me, feeling this truth like a balm that, even in 2018, strengthened weary spirit. I was 29, and my name, Muhammad, was but a shadow of the past I'd left behind. My encrypted messages were my silent rebellion against the violence I once embraced. The memory of the attacks, the tearful prayers of the girls, the fires consuming churches, all still haunted me, testing the faith I'd struggled to build. In my journal, I wrote a simple but fearful question: am I safe? Tears blurred the ink, and the silence of the house filled with the tension of restless wait. Life hidden in cramped spaces, safe houses filled only with the constant hum of a... I avoided looking out the windows, fearing what might find me outside. Meanwhile, my fingers remained steady, typing on the old laptop, sharing my story, telling how I left the group, confessed to Father Mark, and found Jesus. The answers came, one by one, whispers from men and women beginning to question their own paths. You gave me hope, someone... And I cried, because that connection was a healing I hadn't imagined possible. But joy was always accompanied by fear. One night, a note slipped under the door. The smudged ink bore a clear threat: apostate, you will die. My heart pounded with the weight of the message, a cruel reminder of Hassan's cold promise to find me. The nightmares wouldn't leave me alone. One morning, I woke to the sound of a fire burning in my mind. That girl's face, her terrified eyes staring back at me, her silent prayer and accusation I couldn't ignore. I sat up in bed, my chest tight, the room spinning around me. I picked up my Bible, its worn, familiar pages offering a faint comfort. The words were new to me, shaky, but they gave me the strength to keep going, to seek the peace that still seemed so far away. The memory of the burning churches, of the families I terrorized, hammered at my mind day and night. Guilt haunted me, a shadow I couldn't completely shake. Amir appeared one afternoon, his face etched with worry, his voice steady. God is with you, he said, and read Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. I clung to those words, tears streaming silently, my spirit reeling but unbroken. The threats grew bolder. One afternoon, a silhouette moved near our hideout, a suspicious figure that froze me with fear. Short breaths, trembling hands, and we quickly alerted the group. Danger felt like a cold hand. We moved again, to a simple apartment with cracked walls and a heavy silence, so different from the hustle and bustle of Cairo. Sitting by the window, my journal open, I let the twilight fill the room. My emotions swirled, hope and fear. The move brought relief, but the isolation grew. Without family, without my old group, all that remained were the scars of the past and the faith I was beginning to... The laptop was my lifeline, a means to reach others, to keep the light alive. I wrote late into the night, my words like beacons for lost souls, from former radicals seeking a path of escape to hearts that, like mine, thirsted for transformation. Karim was one of them, a man with years in the group, a lost brother like Isef. We connected through shared guilt, a silent but powerful bond. We met secretly, in the back of a cafe. His red eyes glistened with tears as he confessed his sins. Can God forgive me? He asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, my heart aching. Yes, he can. We prayed together there, in a fragile moment of hope, aware of the risk we were taking. The past, however, always lurked. One night the phone rang. Hassan's cold voice threatened my life if I didn't return. I dropped the phone, the impact echoing through the empty room. My hands trembled as the weight of my mother's rejection, my father's anger, and the girl's face washed over me. Amir appeared, wrapping his arms around me like a safe haven. You're not alone, he said, and I clung to those words like a plank in a storm. We moved once more, to an even safer apartment. The constant cycle of escape and hiding was a cruel reminder of my vulnerability. Amidst it all, the nightmares returned. One night, the girl appeared again, but this time, her face was peaceful, and she smiled tenderly. You are free, she said, her soft voice echoing in the silence. I woke with my chest pounding, feeling the dream like an unexpected gift. I wrote in my journal, is this forgiveness? Words that were both a prayer and a release. The threats didn't stop. A new note, a shadow lurked outside, but I surrendered to the Bible's promises, finding the strength to resist. Soon, news arrived from a network, a group of eccentric people like me, seeking healing and redemption. I joined their voice, recording encrypted videos, sharing my testimony. I was a stalker, my voice choked, but love changed me. The answers came, tears, thanksgiving, stories of transformed lives. And so, little by little, redemption began to take deep root within me. One random afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, soft, and careful, and when I read the words, I am that girl, I forgive you, my hands began to tremble, the paper nearly slipping from my fingers. Tears came without warning, spilling an intense mixture of joy and pain. That unexpected forgiveness lifted the weight I carried, shattered my shame. In that moment I thought of my family, of the love lost because of betrayal, and silently mourned. My heart ached with longing, and Amir sat beside me, his voice a balm to my wounded soul. "The grace of God is your strength," he said, reading Romans 8:28 to me. I clung to those words, the tears continuing to flow as my spirit began to strengthen. The long road of flames, anger, and fear thus far was a living testament to the forgiveness I was finally learning to embrace. A gentle voice emerged from the shadows, guiding me to a peace I had previously only imagined. My new hideaway, far from the noise of Cairo, became my sanctuary. The cracked walls felt like a shield against the storms of the past that still swirled, and at dusk, I would sit by the barred window, watching the distant city lights. My journal rested on my lap, its pages filled with stories documenting transformation, the forgiveness that slowly destroyed the shame with. The girl's letter, "I forgive you," was always there, by my side, a gift that lifted the guilt of those dark days. My heart, now a delicate blend of joy and the lingering fear that never completely left me. I was 30 years old, my spirit strengthened by such simple, profound gestures. The network I had joined was my new family. The name Muhammad, a shadow left behind in search of safety, remained distant. I wrote in my journal, "Your grace has set me free." The ink, blurred by tears, was a prayer that echoed in the silence of the room. The journey of rage and fire thus far had become a story of redemption. I was alive, a voice emerging from the shadows, speaking from. The days that followed were silent, but full of purpose. I came to lead this clandestine network. Our meetings took place in hidden spaces, basements lit by flickering lamps, the air thick with the scent of tea and hope. With a trembling voice, I shared my testimony. The attacks, the burned churches, the kidnapping of that girl, the dream that changed my life. Men and women listened, their faces etched with guilt. In that moment, I felt something new, a connection, a healing that only their presence could bring. One night, Hadi, a former combatant with a scar on his hand, sat beside me. His eyes, red from crying, reflected my pain. "I killed too," he whispered, and together we cried. Our shared grief became a bridge, his trembling hand holding mine, a silent promise of redemption. My encrypted videos grew in reach, becoming beacons for so many silent voices. I spent nights recording, my words steadfast even though my soul was still scarred by pain. The messages came flooding in. Former radicals, lost people thanked me, their words exploding inside me. "You saved me," one wrote, and the tears came again. The connection we built brought a hope I never expected to find, but the fear never completely disappeared. A note slipped under the door, its letters sharp as knives, promises of death, and Hassan's cold voice on the phone, filled with rage and hatred, vowing revenge. The shadow of the past still haunted me, but I was determined to carry on, even when everything seemed to be conspiring against me. The H1 made my heart race, a shadow over my new life. I prayed that the Bible's promises would protect me from the darkness. In 2025, I moved to Spain. The network's reach expanded, a safe haven arranged by Amir. The city's gray streets, rain-soaked and unfamiliar, contrasted with the desert. My heart pounded with anticipation. I settled into a small apartment with barred windows and stood outside a church. My voice broke as I told my story. The attacks, the girl's forgiveness, the grace that saved me. The congregation wept with their hands warm in mine, and I felt less alone, a sense of belonging that eased the pain of my past. A woman, Mariam, hugged me, her tears wetting my shoulder, her escape from radicalism mirroring my own. I knew then that this was my calling. The nightmares faded, but they never went away. One night I woke to the girl's face. She smiled, her voice soft. "You are free." I sat up, my chest lightened, the dream a gift of peace. I wrote in my journal, "Will this be my redemption?" The words were a prayer, my tears, a release. Threats followed me, a shadow outside the apartment, a message on my cell phone. I hid my shallow breathing but prayed for strength to grow. Amir, now a pastor, saw my face lined with pride. "You are a voice for many," he said, reading John 10:27. "My sheep hear my voice." And I clung to that promise. My spirit soared. One afternoon, a reunion with Hadi brought healing. We met in a park, the rain falling gently. His scarred hand gripped mine as he shared his progress, leaving finding faith. "You started this," he said, his voice breaking, and I wept. The shared journey, a testament to grace. The network grew, our videos gained depth, and I connected with former radicals whose stories of escape mirrored mine. One night, I walked the streets of Spain with Mariam, handing out blankets to homeless people, whose gratitude was a silent joy. A young man hugged me, tears wetting and I felt a sense of purpose emerge from the silence. The past lingered, a shadow I could not completely escape. I thought of my mother's rejection, my father's anger, the girl's terror, and I prayed for them, my heart aching with love and longing. One day, a letter arrived in unfamiliar, gentle handwriting, from a man from the plundered village, forgiving me for the lost home. I broke down, sobs echoing, the sweet grace overwhelming me, my shame melting away. I responded, hands trembling, "Thank you," an act of release. Amir sat with me, his voice steady. "God's love redeems all," he said, reading from Romans 8:38-39. I clung to him, tears streaming, my spirit at. As dusk fell, I sat by the window, the rain beating against the glass. My journal opened. The violent life in the forest I left behind still echoed, but the girl's forgiveness and the villager's grace were threads in a tapestry of redemption. I traced the flame's journey to this moment and wrote, "My silence has become a voice." The apartment fell silent, its walls a shield, and I smiled. The grace I found became a beacon, guiding others as it guided me. I prayed for my family, my heart overflowing. The voice of redemption, a song I would carry into the night.